Hello, this is an episode of Hour of the Wolf. My name is John Freund. With me for the first time in way too many years.
Long time.
Yeah, is Veronica Schanoes. I would not care to venture an actual guess when the last time you were either reading for us at the New York Review of Science Fiction Readings or on Hour of the Wolf.
It would be at least 6 years.
Yeah.
I would have still been in my 30s. A young thing.
You still are.
Very sweet.
And Professor Schanoes, you're still at Queen's College, right?
I am. I'm associate professor at Queen's College in the Department of English there. It's a great department. I'm happy to be there. I'm warm, supportive. CUNY is drastically underfunded, but that is not the department's fault.
Yeah. Do you know Carlos Hernandez there?
I don't think I do.
I know he teaches English at CUNY. I thought maybe it was Queen's College. He certainly lives in Queens, but
it's possible he's there and I don't know him, especially because I usually teach. Back in the days when we used to teach in person, I would go, my teaching days were Tuesday, Thursday. So if he was there on a Monday, Wednesday schedule, I just might never have bumped into him.
Yeah, you should. Well, you should look him up. If you don't know him as a writer, you should. Wonderful short stories. Started off with interfictions edited by Delia Sherman, and he now is writing middle grade school novels for Disney. So that's
pretty good.
That's pretty good, and that's got a lot of potential to it. But he teaches English at CUNY, and I always thought it was Queen's College. So keep a lookout for him.
I will.
CSE CUNY.
Sorry?
Do you know Claire Cooney, CSE CUNY?
Yes, but she's not at CUNY.
No, she's not, but she's married to Carlos.
Oh, okay. That I didn't know that either, but shows what I know.
Yeah, and she's a World Fantasy Award winner. You are a Shirley Jackson Award winner.
Yes,
I remember watching that. I was so lucky. I was on a panel at ReaderCon that lasted till a something 30. And I passed by, and you're on stage having just gotten the award. And I wish I had my camera ready. I saw Sam Miller.
I remember him there.
And I thought, oh, it's a shame he probably didn't win, because I missed the short story category. And as I'm telling him this, I'm feeling something very sharp poking into my stomach. And I was looking, and I didn't realize those Shirley Jackson Awards are sharp, literally.
Oh, they are. I mean, in case you need to defend yourself, you never know if you're in a Shirley Jackson scenario.
That's true, but then you need something really to stop rocks from hitting you or something like that.
Well, the nominees for the Shirley Jackson Award get these like tiny little rocks with yeah, they're so cute. Do I have one on hand, or I think they're all in the other room? Oh no, wait a minute. Nope, I think they're all in the other room, unfortunately. Otherwise, I'd show you one. They're so cute. They're like little water rounded. I'm showing you my hands that are not in the picture. They're like little water polished rocks that have the Shirley Jackson Award year carved on it, and so you can use them to stone somebody if you get enough of them together. I wouldn't, but you could.
Yeah. I have a further Shirley Jackson Award type story. Better to tell you off air about.
Oh my. Okay.
having to do with her children.
I will look forward to this. I wonder if I know this story.
It was simply that okay, I'll tell it. I was suggesting this was an event held at KGB that Ellen Datlow put together.
Mm-hmm.
And it was to raise money for the Jackson Award. Mm-hmm. And her children were there to discuss the whole thing. And they were giving out prizes of various kinds. And I'm saying, oh, come on, you have to call this a lottery.
Of course.
Yeah. And apparently, according to some of them, according to sources,
yes,
the children did not want the word lottery to be used. And I said, well, that's sort of a killjoy kind of thing. And somebody said, please, Shirley Jackson and her children, didn't you read The New Yorker? Don't you know? Have you ever read We Have Always Lived in This Castle, which is sort of about them? And
I have read it. I didn't know it was about them.
I don't know if that's the one that's about them, the two girls anyway. Mm-hmm. But at any rate.
I taught that book once. Sorry.
Yeah, well, it's such a great, okay, we're getting off topic again. I do this with you. Mm-hmm. It's too much fun to talk with you. Have you seen the recent movie? It's one of the streaming services.
Wait, are we thinking of The Haunting of Hill House, or We Have Always Lived in the Castle?
No, We Have Always Lived in This Castle.
Really?
Yeah. I'll find out the information and send it to you. I loved it.
I didn't even know it existed.
Yeah.
I would love to see that.
Yeah, it's very good. I was not thrilled with the reimagining of Hill House that it was on Netflix.
I have not gotten to see it yet. I have to confess. I rarely get to see anything these days after my son goes to bed. I don't have the attention span required for like an hour-long episode of something.
Right. And Hill House, I think it's just called Hill House. Is it's 8 hours. Mm-hmm. 1 hour segments. Whereas We've Always Lived in This Castle is more like a true movie.
Okay.
Like 2 hours. And it's either Amazon Prime or Netflix. Okay. It's one of those two. But I will find it. Mm-hmm. I will send you the information. I heartily recommend it. It's all right. Weird all the right ways.
I will look forward to it. I'm interested. So much of that book is Mary Kat's voice and what she doesn't tell you that I'm intrigued as to how you can make a movie out of it. But I will look forward to finding out.
Yeah. Well, of course, it's told from that point of view. It's told from her point of view, and the unreliable narrator mm-hmm. has become a thing.
I'll tell you, one of my favorite parts of We Have Always Lived in the Castle, I in fact cribbed for a scene from Among the Thorns. Mm-hmm. The scene where Ida, the narrator, tells her uncle that she's going to kill everybody in the village when she grows up.
Right.
Is a direct callback to the scene where Mary Kat tells, oh my God, her sister, whose name I'm blanking on right now, her sister, that she's going to rain death down on everyone. And her sister says, can I spoiler We Have Always Lived in the Castle for everybody listening? Yeah. Okay. And her sister says, like you did before. And she says, mm-hmm. yes, like I did before.
That's fairly early in the book.
I think it's like 2/3 or 3/4 of the way through.
Oh, okay. As we're starting the reveals.
Yes.
As Jackson starts the reveals. How many books do you have now?
I'm afraid just 2, the academic one and this new one, which I'm super excited about.
It's wonderful. I don't know why. I guess it's the bane of the short story writer to not be easily be able to get a book published.
Well, this has all come, when I think if you're a short story writer who is more prolific than I am, it's probably easier and takes less time. Once, once I was fortunate, once I, collected, once I had written a number of stories that were, I think, worthy of being in a collection. Uh, Tor.com and Ruoshi made it very easy for me indeed, and I'm super grateful about that. But it sort of happened all at once. It felt like after a long stretch of me thinking it would never be able to happen. So
yeah, because it's hard to get an agent that way.
oh, yes.
Although a few people have succeeded, I'm sure.
Mm.
Well, Sam Miller eventually graduated to novels,
Mm-hmm.
but Barbara Krasnoff, my partner, got herself an agent
Mm-hmm.
after having her book come out from a small publisher. So
Mm-hmm.
that's hopeful for some of us. And the short story is one of those fabulous crippled invalids that people are always saying, "Oh, the short story is dead," and it's like,
Right.
no, it
It's
has been.
and it's doing just fine, really. I think. I mean, there's great venues for short stories. I like what you can do in a short story. You can sort of do some more spectacular pyrotechnics because you don't have to keep it up for quite so long as you do in a novel. Um, so I certainly hope it's not going anywhere as a genre.
It's not. And whenever I talked about the difference between short stories and novels, I like to quote the sadly recently deceased James Gunn.
Mhm.
This is the writer, not the movie director, everybody, who recently passed away at 93, thereabouts. He's with the University of Kansas for so many years and an expert in audio science fiction and wrote many novels, at least one of which got turned into a TV series, not a very good TV series, but there it was nonetheless. And in an anthology that he put together, he wrote an essay at the beginning about the novel is a wonderful thing. You can wander about and explore everything, whether it's directly germane to the tale or not. But the short story is a polished jewel. There is no word, no sentence in a short story that doesn't help further the story.
Mm.
Every word is carefully chosen. No sentence is in there for the point of showing a wit or anything like that. And so he thought the short story was perhaps the perfect form of fiction. And then the rest of the essay, I have to find that again. It's been 20 years since I read it. Why it's so particularly good for speculative fiction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I would love to. I don't think I've ever read that essay. It seems like a beautifully written piece, though, from the part that you quoted.
It was. It stayed with me
Mm-hmm.
so well, and it's come to mind since his recent passing. But it's. I mean, all such passings are sad. On the other hand, 93 years old, working,
Mm-hmm.
University of Kansas, I think in Lawrence,
Mm-hmm.
right up.
We should all be so lucky.
Yeah, and prolific. He was just never famous in the way that so many great science fiction fantasy writers
Mm-hmm.
got famous,
Mm-hmm.
or rather never get famous. It's just the very few that somehow do make that. So the fact that your new book is a book of short stories And they're wonderful stories. I mean, I didn't have to, when you sent me the book, I didn't have to read it as a new thing. I had known so many of those stories for so long. And how many awards have you gotten besides?
Just the one, just the one. I was nominated for 3 that year, which was pretty exciting.
That's right. Yeah.
And I know it's a cliche to be like, I'm happy just to be nominated, but I was pretty happy just to be nominated. I got to
Oh,
tell
yeah.
you,
No,
it was exciting enough.
there is real truth to that. And that's when Barbara got her nomination, Nebula nomination for a short story. A few things we learned. One is you are not a nominee, you are a finalist. Because once the award has been given out, you're no longer a nominee.
Good
But
point.
you will always, for the rest of your life, have been a finalist.
That's a good point. I should put it on my business card.
Yeah, there you go. At least on the CV.
Yes. Oh, it is on the CV, no question.
Yeah. How would you describe your fiction overall?
I would say the stories in this book.
State the name of the book.
Oh, of course. The stories in this book, Burning Girls and Other Stories by me, Veronica Schanoes. They sort of
those we're shooting video, but this is a radio show first and foremost. So we should say that's SCHANOES.
Oh, of course. Yes, my name does not sound like it spells, unfortunately. They sort of run from the earlier short stories I wrote, in which I was really inspired to write by Kelly Link and her work. And Kelly made me feel like reading Kelly's work. I felt like I hadn't felt like that since I'd discovered Angela Carter's work when I was 19 or so. And so a lot of the stories in here are from that earlier period where I was doing a lot of sort of surrealist, quasi-surrealist, strange, weird, aspiring to be Kelly Link stories. And I love them. And then some of the more recent stories go more into, in some ways, a more traditionally linear narrative, but we're working with historical fantasy. And some of them are still messing with narrative structure a little bit. I'm thinking of Phosphorus, which is one of my favorite stories that I've written, because it does such funky stuff with narrative structure. I love that. So I would say
it was a lot of fun. I only read that for the first time in reading this collection.
I like that one. I worked hard on that one. I got some great suggestions from wonderful people. Roz Caveney, you know Roz, yes?
I do. She's done the radio show once and the reading series twice, despite living and not virtually, in person, despite coming over the pond.
She is amazing, and she helped me talk through the ending, the resolution of the story. And I think it was either before that or just after that, I brought it to Sycamore Hill, and I got like fantastic suggestions there from people. So
Sycamore Hill is a writer's workshop.
Yes. And it was at Sycamore Hill that somebody said the original draft of that story did not tell you how the Matchwomen's strike ended. And someone at Sycamore Hill said, well, do we know how the strike ended? And I said, oh, yeah, I just didn't know anyone but me would be interested in labor history. And everyone said, we want to know how the strike ended. And I thought, okay, now I know. And the story became twice as long and went in a whole different direction. So I'm very grateful for the advice and suggestions, support I've had from other writers in science fiction fantasy community.
Yeah, writers' workshops are a wonderful thing. Many people are not, especially peer workshops. So we're not talking about somebody who takes, say, your class at Queens College, but more like where somebody sends something they've recently written first draft, might be what the author considers finished work, sends it to everybody in the group. The group meets nowadays by Zoom, but they used to actually meet in a room, and everybody does a critique, maybe timed for 3 minutes. And we've actually done a few of those live on Hour of the Wolf. We've had about 6 meetings. Oop, excuse me 1 second.
Okay.
There we go. We've had about 6 meetings of, how can I forget the name of the group? It's, the one with Matt Kressel.
Oh, Altered Fluid. Right?
Altered Fluid. And yeah, a couple of people there have done okay, like Nora Jemison.
Yeah.
All that. Still very active and part of the group. And to have those people read the story and say positive things and often negative things, but always constructive. It's a very difficult thing because there are people who join such groups and then find, well, you didn't explain this character very well at all. I didn't understand this person, this plot element, this thing, this, that. And of course, that's, taking somebody's literary baby and shredding it a little. So you have to have a good understanding of, criticism. And, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I think that at least for me, I was very lucky in that my writing teacher, and I only took a couple of writing workshops in college, had a very workman-like approach to the whole affair. It was, you do the work, you bring in the work, we critique the work. So I sort of internalized that approach to writing, and I tend not to take writing criticism seriously, and I think that's a good quality to have in a writer's circle, in a writer's group. Workshop. That's where I was looking for, in a writer's workshop, because otherwise it's so easy to feel attacked when usually people are of goodwill and nobody's attacking, right? They're trying to point out where you can make the story stronger. That's my experience, at least. I've been lucky, I know.
Yeah. And it also depends on the quality of the workshop. There can be occasionally toxic people that attend a workshop, and they can be a little, maybe they are attacking. But those people tend not to stay in the workshop long. But if somebody comes in, they're new, and they don't know that such and such a person enjoys watching somebody be shredded. And I won't say names, but I'm familiar with some circumstances, because I know all the members of about 4 writers groups.
I want to hear off the air who I should be aware of.
So one of the things is, you said you might read for us.
I certainly can do that. And I think last time we picked out a story of just the right length. The How to Bring Someone Back from the Dead one is, I think, the one we thought would be the right length, which is a story. Can I talk a little bit about it before I read it?
Okay.
Yeah. It's a story that I love. And in particular, this collection, as we talked about just the other day, is dedicated to Jenna Felice, who was...
Do me a favor, we froze up for a moment there. So repeat what you were just saying.
Sure. So we were talking the other day about the fact that this collection, this book, is dedicated to Jenna Felice.
Yes. I meant to mention that again.
Yeah. And I was fortunate enough to know her be close with her for about 9 or 10 years. We were best friends. We met as teenagers, and she became a very, very good and respected editor at Tora Books. And
And an important part of the New York Review of Science Fiction readings, which I now run.
And yes, and that, I'm sorry, I forgot for a minute. And she died quite suddenly when we were 25 years old, which was, it's coming up on 20 years now this year.
Wow.
So this story,
From the condition that I sometimes suffer, anaphylactic shock.
Yes.
I haven't had an incident in about, well, I guess about 15, 20 years. But I had been talking to her about it and saying, oh, yes, carry an EpiPen. And she was just about to get one.
Oh, she had one because she had had a previous incident. I can't remember when now, but she'd had a previous incident.
Yeah, but there was some reason why she was unable to get to it.
I'll tell you the reason why is because never mind. She did not always take her own health as seriously as I wanted her to.
Yeah. Whereas I could reach, I haven't had an incident in, well over a decade, but I have one within 10 feet of me at all times.
It's what you have to do. I'm glad to hear that you do. And yeah, so yeah, of anaphylactic shock, as you say, and it was a terrible thing, and I miss her. I miss her very much. And this is sort of this story I wrote, I guess, in the year or two following her death, where I had just started to work on fairy tales as a scholar, and I had just lost Jenna. And so that was sort of the origin story of this particular tale. So while the book is dedicated to her, this story in particular is very much about her, and what it means to lose somebody so suddenly and so young, and trying to look to older stories to find a model or a template or a schema of how to understand what's happened.
Yeah.
So, 1, pain. It hurts to come back from the dead, and it hurts to bring someone back from the dead. 2, the journey. There is always a journey, and it is often long. You will have to take the path of pins and the path of needles. You will walk on the pins, and your feet will bleed. You will walk on the needles, and your feet will bleed, red like your jacket. You must always wear bright colors when you go to the underworld. This is your body mourning. It hurts to bring someone back from the dead. You will need to be brave and to go into the woods. It is dark and cold, close and damp. You will be there for a long time. You will be on foot. By the time you come out, flashing lights and bright colors will confuse you. You will not be able to respond to them. Your open eyes will not focus, and you will not remember how to turn your head. You will long for the woods, and you will not understand how to leave, how to be in the world outside of the woods. The woods will be the only real place. That is why you must bring bright colors with you. Dressing all in black is a mistake. You will carry a torch in each hand as you search. Your feet will bleed. If the dead drink the blood, they will be able to speak to you, but they will not come back with you. Be careful. Do not let the person you want to bring back drink your blood. You will travel for a long time holding your 2 torches. You must not stray from the path, and you must not pick the flowers. You may ask for help. You will ask the sun for direction, and you will ask the moon. Neither will help you. The moon is not able, and the sun is not willing. Triple Hecate will have heard screaming, and she will tell you where. You may ask an old woman who sits by the path mumbling to herself. If you walk by without a word, she will reveal herself to be a witch and eat you in 2 bites. But if you ask her for help and offer to share an apple with her, she will give you guidance. Do not throw stones at ravens. You may ask wolves for help, but you should not believe what they tell you. They do not think carefully. They do not think as we do. You will travel a long ways in the dark. Perhaps you will have to make your way through thorns and brambles. The thorns will rip your skin and lay the delicate, palpating network of your veins exposed to the cold wind. You may be caught, and the thorns will reach over to block out the sky. All you will be able to see will be the walls of thorns, and you will forget that you even knew anything else. The world will become patterns of thorns, patterns whose repetitions you'd counted and memorized years ago and never thought you'd have to see again. You will not want to leave. Nothing outside of the thorns will seem real. Perhaps the thorns will take out your eyes and you will not see anything at all. You will eat roots. Eventually, you will eat stones. 3. Journey's End. You will finally find your beloved. She will be chained in outer darkness, wailing for you in her sleep. She will be covered with dust and cobwebs. She will be surrounded by others sleeping like she sleeps. Or perhaps she will be in a clearing behind glass like a dead duck in the window of a Chinese restaurant. She will shine like a roasted duck as well. She will be surrounded by little men muttering little words. You will not hear them. Perhaps the men will be wearing white coats. The shine comes from the sweat on her skin as her fever climbs. She is having no dreams. Will you recognize her? Her face will be porridge, too hot and too pale, slumped like snow on a fallen scaffolding. Her hair will be pulled back. There will be pallid fluorescent lights and no color on the beige walls. The floors will be in washed out squares like the floor of your high school, her high school too. You will sit down next to her and take her hand. She is not there. You can see her. You can touch her. You can smell her. But she is not there. Her chin is hanging in a very peculiar way. Her eyes are too big and so are her teeth. She is bleeding. She is dying, Egypt, dying. She is dead. She is in chains, long whisper-thin chains. They are as slender as the skein of wool you have unwound as you walked. Did I not mention the skein of wool? Do not forget the wool. It is your memories, your time. The chains are not silver. They are not metal. They do not make a clinkety-clankety clattering noise. They are pale and fuzzy. They are colorless. They look like dust bunnies stretched out, like gray hairs knit together by dead skin. There are so many of them. They cover your beloved completely and hide her face. She cannot breathe. The dust is in her throat and she cannot breathe. 4. Your beloved. She is one of many and you cannot find her. You cannot recognize her. Also, you are exhausted. You have come such a long way already. You will always know her. She is young and she has long blonde hair. She is young and she has cherry red lips and hair black as the raven's wing. She is old, so old that she is dead, with short white hair almost all fallen out. She has hair like yours, short and coarse, dark and curly. She wears cat's eye glasses. She is shorter than you are. She has a mole in the center of her neck and a scar on her right temple from a cat's scratch. Cats are never up to any good. Her fingers are swollen. Her tongue is swollen and chapped, and it has been bleeding. She has a short tongue. She is young enough to be your daughter. She is your daughter. She is only bones. Her fingers are swollen. Her rings don't fit anymore. He looks like you, a warrior king, lean, muscles, scars. She looks just like you, only she is dead. 5. What you will do. You will kiss her. Everybody knows that. 6. What else? You will kiss her. You will jar her or perform the Heimlich maneuver. She might be choking on an apple or some pomegranate seeds or maybe a plastic tube. Help her. Play music. Play her favorite song on your wonder horn. Play a wild, tearing song. Play a love song. Play 69 of them. Draw the needle out of her arm with your lips. Stop the blood with your mouth. The tube and the needle are not helping anymore, and she hates them. It will hurt. Paint your face now so that you look like a warrior. There will be snakes crawling beneath your skin. You will vomit from the pain, and because it is disgusting to be filled with snakes. Lower the guardrail at the side of her bed. Check her hair for poison combs. Unsnap the shoulder of her gown. Lie down next to her very carefully. Wrap your arms around her. She will not hug you back. Rest your head on her shoulder. You will have to go where she is. Close your eyes. It might hurt. It will hurt. You can cry. It won't help. 7. Afterward. She will turn your head and look at you. Call her name. She will recognize you and smile. She is so tired, and she hurts. She hurts so much. She is confused. She doesn't know where she is. She won't thank you. She will blink and sit up. Take her by the hand. Hold her tightly. Give her one of your torches. Don't worry if she doesn't talk at first. Voices take a long time to come back. And anyway, her throat hurts from the tube, or the apple, the pomegranate, whatever. Lead her out. Don't look back. 8. How to bring someone back from the dead. There is no way to bring someone back from the dead, but you will make the journey anyway. That's the end of the story. Wow. Reading that brought back a lot of memories all of a sudden.
Yeah, and it's hard to assimilate that so easily, process that. There's a lot in there, especially when both you and I knew the impetus.
Yes.
For
well, I guess that's one of the reasons I wrote it, so that I could remember small things that were second nature at the time, but have since
time passes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Now, how would you classify that story?
When I wrote it as a poem. I wrote it as a prose poem. And perhaps if I had gone on to write much more poetry and get it published, I would still think of it as a prose poem. But since I'm very much a short story writer, it's sort of, I've assimilated it into that particular tradition for myself.
Yeah. Is there any particular reason that you prefer short stories over novels? I should have asked this earlier when we were talking about lengths.
That's interesting. I used to have a very facetious answer to that question, which was that I only had room in my head for one book-length project at a time, and it was my dissertation. But of course, now I've finished my dissertation, and I have another book-length academic project in my head. But I don't think that's really the answer. I do like what you can do, the sort of the formal experimentation that you can do in a short story, because you don't have to sustain it for as long, so that you can sort of experiment with different ways of different structures of a narrative, without having to play them out for several hundred pages or for 80 or 90,000 words. And so that to me makes it less intimidating to try out new structures and new ways of telling a story, new things like that. And I think that's probably the main reason. I have noticed that my stories have gotten longer over time. That when I started publishing stories, my average story was around 4,000 to 5,000 words. And then, of course, Burning Girls was a novella, and the stories that came after that were not novellas, but were also, I think, somewhere around perhaps novelette length in the Asimov's short story novelette novella categories. If they still do those. It's been a long time. I don't know.
Yes, they do.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure. Certainly the various awards, the Nebula and Hugos, certainly still give out awards in those categories.
Of course, yes. Yeah.
It's something to reach for.
Indeed.
What were the stories, the writers, the things that started you writing?
Started is hard because I have been writing as long as I remember. Before I could write, my mother would staple pages together, and I would dictate a story to her, and she would write it down, and then I'd draw the pictures for it. But in terms of the writers who've made me want to write, who've made me feel like that what I write can be written, I would have to say first Angela Carter and then Kelly Link. Reading Carter, I think I discovered her in the public library when I was 18 or 19. And I remember reading, it was Saints and Strangers, a short story collection of hers, which was published in the UK as Black Venus. And I remember thinking very clearly, I didn't know you could write like this. And what I meant was, I didn't know you could write like this and still be taken seriously. Because, of course, I've been reading science fiction and fantasy my whole life. I knew you could write non-realist narratives. But I also knew that, serious writers should stick to realism. And that was one of the reasons I stopped writing for several years, because I really wasn't very interested in writing realism. But I'd been sort of indoctrinated into the idea that was really, the right kind of writing, the important kind of writing. And reading Carter again made me realize that was nonsense. And so that was really an important moment. And not just the fact that she wrote fantasy or the fantastic, but the way she wrote it. Her prose was so lush, so over the top, so rich. I love that. Whenever I hear the writing program dictum of don't tell, show, it always makes me want to go back and add like several more paragraphs of telling. And because in honor of Carter, and because if I could show things, I'd be a painter. I'm telling you things because I'm a writer and I work with words.
Right.
And then it happened again when I was 25, and I read Kelly Link's short story collection, Stranger Things Happen.
Yeah.
And it was the exact same feeling, the feeling that the top of my head was coming off and thinking, I didn't know you could write like this. I don't
think anybody knew that they could write like that until
right?
that book came out, and the things in Lady Churchill's Rosebud Wristlet, which is a magazine that she and her Gavin Grant, her partner, put out.
Yeah. And this time it really was, there was no caveat of and be taken seriously. As you say, I really didn't know a person could write like that. And it was amazing. And reading Kelly's work made me want to write again when I hadn't been writing for a few years. I'd written a little while in college and then sort of set it aside. And then reading Kelly's work made me want to write again, because I mean, if you could write like that, that looks like the most fun thing in the world, right?
Yeah.
So I would have to say Angela Carter and Kelly Link were just absolutely formative for me. But there's so many other writers who are wonderful and and whose work I really aspire to. Right? Everyone from Lewis Carroll to of course, now that I'm trying to think of other names, they all fly out of my head, but you know what I mean.
That's exactly what happens.
Yeah.
Who do you imagine, bad question. I was going to say, who do you imagine your audience to be? But I think a better question is, who do you want your audience to be, aside from everybody?
Aside from everybody. I want my readers to be people who love reading fantasy, who love reading, and who are open to seeing fantasy be used to reflect on intense emotional experiences, right? So that it's for me, the fantasy that I'm interested in is less sort of epic fantasy, right, where the action happens externally to the characters, and more sort of an internal fantasy where a lot of the action is about internal emotional psychological movements. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. And it's not high fantasy which is what they would refer to Tolkien,
Mm-hmm.
for example, is high fantasy, which is, big scope epic
Right.
tales, Conan, or even Terry Pratchett.
Yes. And what I've sort of noticed about my own writing is that the fantasy is very much a by the by sort of element to the stories, that the plots themselves are rarely about the magic. So that Burning Girls, the main plot and conflict, yes, there's a Lilith and it's trying to take the kid, and that's really bad. But the magic that the narrator, Deborah, uses is home magic, right? It's women's magic, it's domestic magic, it's delivering babies, it's abortions, it's healing sick children, right? It's that kind of magic.
Magic with K on the end.
Yeah, yeah. And she runs it as a small business from her home, right? And that's sort of how she makes her way in the world. It's not, she doesn't find herself in a grand battle for the fate of New York City, right? Or for the fate of Bialystok. Um, the stakes are her sister and then her niece.
Which are
And that's big enough, in my opinion.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's always necessary for writers to put, not even the fate of the earth, the fate of the universe will always be at stake in
Right.
any of these things. It's not that somebody very close to you might be harmed, which is, as you say, big enough. It's that the earth will be taken over or grabbed from underneath or some such thing.
Yeah. And in some ways I see it as a very potent metaphor, that when something happens, when we lost Jenna, right? It felt like the world was ending. And so you want to represent that. You want to represent the way those stakes feel. At the same time, I feel like that takes on a life of its own, and then everything has to be bigger and better the next time. I thought that was, by the way, a problem like over the course of several seasons in Buffy, right? In the TV show Buffy, where each season the big bad had to be that much worse until finally it became sort of ridiculous.
Yeah, although, right, yeah, that's true. Although right from the start with the master, that sort of was enough.
That's true. Yeah.
But right now
Yeah.
I am despondent.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, we sort of all knew, but I think we tried really hard not to think about it. I know Charisma Carpenter had certainly spoken earlier, but
Yeah, but
I
this is like another Bill Cosby thing. This is one of my heroes. This is no Harvey Weinstein, who
Mhm.
was loathable when he was nice.
Yes.
This is
Yeah.
this is somebody who just last night we were watching a Marvel movie for the fun of it, and it was a Joss Whedon movie, and you just marvel at the dialogue and the cleverness, and you realize with Whedon how, and this is where he's sort of like Cosby, he broke through barriers. I think people underestimate what Buffy has done for the genre in empowering uh, young girls or teenage girls, at least, to realize themselves. But his thing was not really gender based. It was simply, sounds like it's bullying everybody. And women tend to be more susceptible to that. They're more targeted.
More vulnerable in many ways.
But, yeah.
I think you're right that the impact of Buffy, the TV show, is often hard for people who were not familiar with the cultural landscape pre-Buffy to grasp. I remember this. I was teaching an episode of it once, and this was many years ago. And one of my students said, "Oh, I never bother watching the reruns. It's just another chicks kicking ass TV show." And I said, "No, you have to understand, before Buffy, that wasn't a thing. Chicks did not kick ass except for Xena. There was Xena, and then there was Buffy. And that changed things." And then it does turn out that Whedon is a terrible person, and that's awful to reckon with. Of course, he wasn't the only one who made Buffy what it was. Obviously, I don't think that's the case with any TV show or movie.
Yeah, but he was the creator. He wrote the movie and he directed the movie.
Yeah.
And from that, and the movie has its moments. It's not a great movie, but it has its moments.
It has its moments. I remember it.
Yeah, but from that, to pull out a TV show that was really the second draft, what Buffy should have been in the first place, and that it was an uphill battle. It was not a network show. It was a syndicated show. The network would have touched anything like that.
That's right. It was Channel 11, wasn't it, in New York?
Yeah. And it was the I'm trying to find the phrase there, but it was, he is the closest thing to the auteur. It was able to survive without him as he moved on, and like Marty Noxon, this is Marti, Noxon, took over and took it to places. But he was the auteur. He was, without him, it could never have launched.
No, that is absolutely true, and it is painful to know that he achieved that at the cost of so much suffering on the part of other people.
Yeah.
Particularly young women, given that the show was
aimed at them,
and so important to at least me and other young women I knew at the time, in terms of representing our experiences through the supernatural. Right? Like, there was this episode where Buffy goes to a frat party where she's not supposed to and gets roofied, and wakes up chained in the basement, about to be sacrificed to a snake god. And it's so clearly an episode about date rape. And to see that kind of experience represented on air, it was to see it given supernatural resonance. Was a new experience, at least for me. And I can't speak for everybody, of course, and I know plenty of people didn't like it. I'm not saying it was the only best thing ever, but for me, it was
the landscape. Other people have tried to different extents to imitate it. And as he moved on to other things, I loved most of Firefly. And of course, that got canceled immediately. And that's what happens, I guess, when you're working fairly exclusively for Fox, which he was doing at the time. And then somehow when he gets into the Marvel universe, he gave the superhero experience humor.
I have to confess, I have not seen his Marvel movies.
You've never seen the one called The Avengers? Just simply The Avengers?
I don't know that I have, actually. Like, I've seen very few of the Marvel movies, which is a deficit in my cultural viewing. In my defense, all I can say is, since my son was born over the past 5 years, I'm very, very deficient in many cultural touchstones.
Yeah, I think I would be very interested in your reaction to them if you think of the Marvel superhero movies, at the very least, of being today's fairy tales.
Okay, I have thoughts on this.
Okay, please.
Because I've heard it said, of course, that they're very much contemporary myths.
Mm-hmm.
That I do not spend any time with at all. One of the important characteristics about myths is that at some point in the society that created them, they were believed. That's a really important part of belief, of myth, right? That at some point, these were stories that were understood to be true, not necessarily by everybody, not necessarily all the time, right? The ancient Greek world encompasses a huge several hundred years, right? The same stories are not going to be believed by everybody all the time.
Right.
But that at some point belief was a part of them. And that makes them more foundational to a society, I think, in many ways. Fairy tales are interesting. Fairy tales, as folklorists speak of them, are never meant to be believed. Nobody has ever told the story of Snow White and said, yes, it happened just over there 20 years ago, right? Nobody expects anyone to believe fairy tales with the exception of maybe children whom we like to bamboozle in our culture in a way that's kind of sadistic, in my opinion.
A lot of fairy tales are sadistic.
Yeah. So could they be more the equivalent of fairy tales? To me, this brings in another really salient feature of fairy tales, and that has to do with ownership, right? That fairy tales are not owned by any one company or any one author, right? They are a communal property to draw from. And there's no actual original version. There's no canon, if you will, of fairy tales, right? Even the Grimms collected 3 different versions of Snow White and stitched their version together, the pieces they liked best. And that's just in their part of Germany, right? Not even talking about Snow White in the rest of Europe.
Yeah.
But the Marvel properties are Marvel properties, right? And I think that really fundamentally makes a difference in how we relate to them as viewers or as readers, right? You can only become an official writer of Captain America or Iron Man or Thor if Marvel hires you to be one. You can write fan fiction, but that's not canon, right? Fan fiction is defined in opposition to canon. Whereas when I wrote Burning Girls, I didn't have to contend with the owners of Rumpelstiltskin hiring me. Right? I could just pick up that story and use it. And I decided to for a couple of very, very specific reasons, but I didn't have to clear it with anybody. And now I'm an official fairy tale reteller. That's all I had to do, And I think that's a different relationship to story than the one fostered by contemporary capitalism. And I think that different relationship makes it a different kind of text. Not necessarily better, not necessarily worse, but I do think it makes it a different kind of text.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And that follows and is in keeping. I think it was a combination of Joanna Russ and Darko Suvin said that science fiction